And we're back with video 5 of our Born to Fly Law School video series. Today we'll be talking about reading and briefing cases. We have some sub-points. This is part 2 of our basics of class preparation. We'll be getting into case briefs, what a case brief is, how to systematically approach a case brief, what to look for in a case brief, the practical review of these types of briefs, and also the case in context, or as we like to call here at the OB Law Firm, CIC. Here right now is the man himself, Emmanuel Obi, author of Born to Fly.
All right, I'm back. Did you guys miss me? Probably not. Okay. All right. So we're continuing our discussion about some basic nuggets and some things to keep in mind to help you as you prepare for law school, because that's the whole purpose of this Born to Fly series, and the whole purpose of us putting together this video series is to be helpful, to provide you guys with a resource to help you. And so as Mel mentioned, today we're going to be talking about case briefs. We're going to be talking about coming up with a systematic approach to law school. We're going to be talking about what to look for, practical review, and we're going to be talking about a concept that I like to refer as the case in context. The case in context. This is very, very important because it's going to be key to you effectively preparing and effectively being able to use the materials in a way that's going to get you points on the exam. So, as in with the other videos, I'm going to turn it over to Mel, who's going to have he's got some questions for us, and we'll just run through the questions as he's got them.
All right, in regards to case brief, what exactly is a case brief and what purpose do they serve in law school?
Case brief is what you as a law student your first year will be spending an incredible amount of time on. Why? Because the basic delivery of information, or the basic delivery of knowledge, or the basic delivery of law is generally packaged up in a reported decision. That is a decision or a case in which an issue or issues have come up, the decision has gone to court, and that has resulted in a holding that is now law or considered law. And so in law school, the professors don't just sit there and teach you the law and say, today we're going to talk about the law, and here is the law, and this is what the law says. No, they're going to give you reading assignments and ask you to read these cases, and then you derive and extrapolate from those cases what the law is and how that law will be applied to a similar factual pattern. So case brief is the term that is used for the summary or the summarizing of a case to pull out the distinct forms or the distinct elements that are required to understand that case and understand how it applies to you and how it may potentially apply on an exam. A couple of things about case briefs. A lot of students say, well, listen, I went to the bookstore the other day and I found all of these books that have case briefs in them, and they're like perfect. I mean, they have the case, they're keyed off of the textbook, and like every single case they have a summary, they have the facts, they have the holding, they have the procedure. I mean, this thing is fantastic. Why do I need a brief if I can just go and buy this book? The worst, listen to me carefully, the worst mistake that you can ever make if you're trying to get to the top of the class, if you're trying to get in the top 10% of the class and graduate order of quiff, whatever it is that you're trying to do, the worst mistake that you can make is to buy a book that has canned case briefs in it. Let me tell you why. It is just like substituting the development of your thought process for somebody else's thought process. And if you do this in the first year, the rest of your law school career, and I would submit to you, the rest of your legal career will be irreparably harmed because you have not gone through the critical formative phases that's required to develop that analysis. Let me give you another analogy that actually ties into to the book, The Born to Fly. You know, a caterpillar, right? A caterpillar is born, and it's a caterpillar, right? And the caterpillar goes through life as a caterpillar, and it masters being a caterpillar. Then the caterpillar goes into this cocoon and locks itself off in this cocoon for a little bit, and then it prepares itself. It's feeding on nutrients. It's preparing itself, and then when it's ready, it breaks out of its cocoon and it flies out into the world, and it spreads its wings, and now it's a beautiful butterfly. I will submit to you that when you start law school, you are entering into that cocoon. You're entering into an educational, academic cocoon. And after 3 years of feeding on the nourishment and the knowledge that you're going to get from law school, you're finally going to break out of that cocoon of law school, and you're going to emerge into the world a beautiful legal butterfly ready to fly. If you don't brief your own cases, if you don't systematically develop the experience or the knowledge of briefing your own cases, you are really setting yourself up for not failure, because you'll probably still get by. I mean, the canned books are pretty good. You'll be able to use them. You'll probably be able to get by. But you're not going to be in the top 10% of the class. I can almost guarantee you that. If you don't develop the skill of briefing your own cases and learning how to brief your own cases, I guarantee you're not going to be at the top of the class unless you're some freak genius that's just got a photographic memory. Now, but on the flip side, here's the other thing that I see a lot of times. Don't be the guy that comes into class with a 10-page case brief that is tabbed, that is, that's got a concordance to it, that's got all the terms that you spent 10 hours briefing one case. Why? Because that's not effective use of your time. Case briefing is meant to, in the first year, I would focus on doing it very systematically. Let me tell you how I approached it in law school. How I approached it, I created a case brief worksheet. I created a worksheet that had blanks for information about the case. Case parties, court, jurisdiction, the facts, procedural posture, the holding, the policy, any relevant other considerations. So I created this blank worksheet. And for every case I did, I went through and I systematically forced myself to fill out this worksheet answering these questions about this case. Now, people thought I was crazy and I was doing the most. But why did I do that? I knew if I focused on doing that for the first semester of class, that after the first semester, my ability to brief cases would be on such a level where I wouldn't even need to do these worksheets anymore. I could do what's referred to as book briefing, and that's where you're actually not typing out or writing out actual briefs, but you're doing your briefing in your book, either with a highlighter system or some sort of other system that works for you. So I did that systematically and religiously, and I refused. It's just like an athlete. If you're training and you want to get to the next level, you've got one or two options. You can do it naturally and build the endurance and build the stuff that you need naturally, or you can go and you can take some supplements. You can take some supplements, you can take some enhancements. I will submit to you that when you're briefing, that those enhancements become, or those enhancements are like the case briefs. And what they do is that they prevent you from really developing the skill that you need to be able to brief the cases, which is a fundamental skill that you need in order to be successful in law school. So I don't want to belabor this point, but again, to recap, case briefing is important. It's a very important aspect of law school. It's the basic way that you pull the materials that you need. It's the basic way that you're going to pull the information that you need. Don't cheat yourself. Develop the skills. Learn how to brief the cases. And I promise you that your grades and your legal career will be a lot more better for it.
All right, so thank you for describing what a case brief was and the importance of it, and also going into your systematic approach. So we can skip on down to what to look for. Like, what are some major key components that I should have in my case briefs?
That's a good point. The major thing that you're trying to find from a case. I mean, there's some basic elements. The parties. Who are the parties to the case? What level of court was the case reported in? What is the procedural posture? You'll hear professors use this word a lot. The procedural posture. That is, at what stage are we at? Is this an actual hearing? Or is this a motion? Is this where are we in the procedure? Going back to Civ Pro that we talked about earlier, where are we in that procedural process? But then the really important thing that you have to pull out of every case that you read in law school is, what's the holding? What is the law? Because when you read a case, you're not reading it for the fun of it. You're not reading it for leisurely reading. This isn't a Grisham novel that you're reading, right? You're reading the case because the case contains a piece of law that you need to know to address the questions on the exam and just to know generally, right? And then the holding, and this actually foreshadows a point that we're going to talk about earlier, this notion of putting your case in context, right? Putting every case that you read, you should ask yourself after you've read the case, why am I reading this case? Why is this case included? Is this case the majority rule on this issue? Is this case the minority rule on this issue? Is this case showing a factual distinction and how the law applies to a factual distinction? Or is this case showing an exception to the rule? Is this case a case that reflects the policy values associated with this issue? Or is this a case that deals with something else? You should always, always, always ask yourself, why is this case here? Case in context. Why am I reading this case? Because it's only when you ask yourself that question that then you'll be able to categorize that case for purposes of applying on your exam when you're given a question. And a lot of times you'll have a case that will introduce the majority rule, which is the rule that is followed in the majority of jurisdictions. But then sometimes you'll have a case that will show you the minority rule. That's the rule that's only applied in a subset of jurisdictions. Now, why is that important? Why is that important? Because on the exam, your professor may tell you, assume the majority rule applies. Okay, well then you know that the majority rule applies. Your professor may tell you, assume the minority rule applies, and you know the minority rule applies. But more often than not, the professor won't even tell you a jurisdiction. Why? Because the professor is looking for you to say, well, assuming that we're in the majority rule is as follows, and applying the majority rule to the facts, we get to this conclusion. But, however, if we're not in a majority rule and we happen to be in a minority rule, a slightly different rule would apply. This rule, and the rule would apply as follows and would lead to a different conclusion. Again, going back to this whole notion of thinking like a lawyer, thinking about all of the various things that you have to consider when you're doing your analysis and when you're reading cases, your case in context, and putting this in the proper framework is absolutely critical. What else do you have from me, Mel?
Is there a certain way that I should review these cases to tailor it to the exam that would be at hand?
That's a good question. That's a good question. Going back to systematic review. Again, in law school, it's not like undergrad. You're not going to get quizzes. You're not going to have midterms. You're not going to have a series of examinations or a series of things that will collectively make up your grade, which kind of gives you the balance of, okay, well, if I made a really bad grade on a quiz, then I can make it up on my midterm. No, you will be in a class for a full semester, which is like what, 4 months, 5 months, however long a full semester is, and you will absorb massive amounts of material, and then your exam in that case or in that class will come down to 1 3-hour exam. 1 3-hour exam will determine your entire grade for a whole semester. So what does that mean? That means that a lot of folks, and I've seen these folks in the library, they were literally around exam time breaking down. Folks were literally in the library breaking down, either sobbing or either just breaking down because it's 2 weeks before the exam and they realize that there's 5,000 pages of material that they have not stayed on top of. And now 2 weeks before the exam, they're realizing that there's absolutely no way that they can come up, to catch up because they've been, procrastinating because of the examination process kind of sets you up for the okie doke of, oh, I still have time, oh, I still have time, oh, I still have time. And then next thing you know, it's after Thanksgiving, legal research is heating up, you have exams in 2 weeks, and you realize that you haven't really prepared. So how do you deal with that? Going back to what I recommended earlier, systematic review. Systematic review. Systematic review of your information. You got to review this stuff daily. Okay? And I'm not talking, listen, let me take a step back. If you're just going to law school just to get by and just to get a law degree, don't listen to anything I'm saying. Okay? But if you're going to law school like I went to law school realizing that I'm spending a lot of money to get this degree and the only way that I'm going to get the benefit of it is if I graduate into the top of my class, and the only way that I'm going to graduate at the top of my class is if I do what I need to do and grind as hard as I need to grind, those are the folks that I'm talking to right now. The folks that want to, just get a degree for the sake of getting a degree, you don't really care, you don't want to work at a big firm, you don't want to have the opportunity to make a six-figure salary, you don't want to do any of that stuff, fine. Ride the curve, don't listen to anything that I'm talking about. But for those of you who are hungry, for those of you who are ready to grind, for those of you who are ready to take it to the next level, those are the folks that I'm talking to. And in order to do that, you got to have your daily review. You got to review this stuff every day. You got to review your notes every day. Then you got to have your weekly review. At the end of the week, you review everything that you've covered during that week. Then you got to have your topical review, i.e. when you finish a section, we just finished negligence, review your negligence notes. We just finished intentional torts, review your intentional torts. We just finished adverse possession and property, review all of your notes in adverse possession. And then you're systematically outlining. We'll have a separate section on the whole process of outlining and why that's essential and why you shouldn't fall victim to the other okie doke of law school, which is, oh my goodness, I found this outline that somebody else did. It's fantastic. It's the Bible. Outlines in law school are often referred to as the Bible because there's, these outlines that somebody did 10, 15 years ago. They're so comprehensive. It has everything in it, and everybody who has it thinks that they have some secret weapon that's going to know. That's somebody else's outline. That's somebody else's thought process. That's somebody else's conceptual process. So for you to think that you're going to use somebody else's conceptual process and go into a law school exam and make an A, don't fool yourself, okay? You got to do your own outlining. You got to prepare your own outline. You got to take it to the next level. You got to prepare it to the next level, and then once you get there, you'll be ready for success. Okay. So we'll wrap it up here. We've got another session coming up. Our next session is actually on outlining, right? Actually, our next section is on outlining. Again, these are just some videos that I like to put out because I know law school is about to start. Mel is getting ready to go to law school. We're doing this in part for his benefit, but we're doing this in part for you, the kids who are getting ready to go to school. As I mentioned before, law school is hard, but you're here, and you wouldn't be here if you hadn't demonstrated that you had what it takes to survive and to make it in an environment like this. So until we meet again, keep studying, keep pushing. We'll see you soon.